Let me begin with a story. This happened during the time of the Buddha after he had attained enlightenment. After he had attained enlightenment, Buddha used to go about teaching people about the wisdom that he had just gained. But the members of the established religious order at that time considered him to be a threat and an upstart. So he had a lot of opposition. So one day he was sitting and teaching his disciples when this man bursts into the room and starts to abuse him. He hurls abuse after abuse upon Buddha, and Buddha just sits there and smiles. So after a large, long torrent of abuse that he hurls upon Buddha, this man stops exhausted because aggression can be exhausting. And he asks Buddha, I've been abusing you for so long, and all you're doing is smiling at me. And Buddha says, suppose you were to bring me a gift and I were to refuse to take it. With whom would that gift be? And the man says, with me. So then Buddha says, that's the same with your abuse. And this man has this instant transformation and becomes his disciple. Such is the power of awareness. Vipassana in the Buddhist tradition means insight into the true nature of reality. It mainly looks at what is called the three marks of existence: impermanence, suffering, and the realization of non-self or egolessness. Traditionally, Vipassana used to be practiced in a religious setting by monks, but in the 20th century it began to be taught to lay persons, and it took on a non-religious, non-sectarian form. I learned it in a 10-day silent retreat in India. The Vipassana meditation practice consists of 2 steps: samatha meaning calm and vipassana meaning insight. Samatha is achieved by the practice of anapana meditation. Anapana involves the simple act of observing your breath. The breath is considered to be the bridge between our mind, body, and our spirit. And yet it is something that we hardly notice, or not at all. We are encouraged to become aware of our in-breath and our out-breath, that is the full breath, with the start, middle, and end. The start being the beginning of the breath, the middle the continuation of the breath, and the end is when the in-breath or out-breath ceases. That slowly, as your awareness of your breath continues, you begin to focus on the space at the tip of your nostril or under your nose where your breath leaves and enters your body. You do this for 3 days. Do nothing but watch your breath. You must be wondering, what's the point of all this? What a ludicrous waste of time. I must confess I felt the same. Here I was, far away from home, eating bland food and sleeping on a strange bed and doing nothing but watching my breath. But I must admit, by the end of the 3rd day, I had changed my mind. In the beginning, watching your breath for even a minute is difficult. 10 seconds into it and your mind has already taken over and taken you far, far away. It's busy enjoying itself, having a party at your expense. You are encouraged to observe that. Even if your focus returns to your breath half an hour later or a couple of hours later, that's fine. The main thing is to become aware and return your observation to your breath. This observation is encouraged to be non-judgmental. When you realize your mind has wandered, your tendency is to be hard on yourself. You say to yourself, you fool, you failure. You can't even watch your breath for a minute. You're told not to do that. You're told to patiently and without judgment bring your attention back to your breath. Just as you would a toddler who keeps running about. You don't beat up a toddler for wandering. You don't punish it or torture it. Just as the toddler, it's your mind's nature to wander. You acknowledge that, accept that, and without judgment, bring your attention back to your breath. Over a period of time, you find that the mind wanders less and less, and your awareness grows and grows. By the end of the third day, you are able to keep your awareness on the breath at the tip of your nose almost all the time. So, what's the purpose, you might ask? Hopefully, the realization that the mind is a tool, only a tool, just like a hammer or screwdriver, a much more sophisticated tool perhaps, but a tool nevertheless. We pick up a hammer only when we need it, then we put it down. We don't go around all day with a hammer in our hand. People might think we are mental or a serial killer. Then they might even call the police. Einstein very famously said, "Our mind is meant to be a servant, but we have made it our master." Very true. We have over-identified with our minds, but we are not our minds. We are consciousness. We are divine beings who have a body and a mind, not the other way around. The second part is the Vipassana practice. By the end of 3 days, you have already sharpened your focus. And so you use this focus to observe various parts of your body and all sensations that arise in these parts of the body. Once again, without judgment. Pleasure may arise, but usually pain does. Your back will hurt, your legs will hurt, you will feel itchy in all the unreachable parts. Most significantly, emotional pain will arise. With no TV or books or music or any of the other distractions in life, all the pain you have not dealt with will raise their ugly heads. You are encouraged to observe it without trying to mitigate it. You are asked to avoid trying to move from discomfort to comfort. The Buddha said we are always in two states, seeking pleasure or avoiding pain. We will medicate ourselves, distract ourselves with meaningless activities, numb ourselves with empty relationships, run away, hide, suppress. We will do anything but face our pain. It is this tendency that's the cause of all our addictions, compulsive behavior, abuse, and much of our suffering. But avoiding pain does not make it go away. We are encouraged to sit with it, look at it, and move through it with the light of awareness shining on it. Usually it melts and dissipates. The other thing you are encouraged to observe is that emotion is the body's response to a thought. So let's say I say something rude to you and you get angry. My being rude to you is not the cause of your anger. No. You had a thought that probably went, "How dare she?" Or "She's such a mean person." Or "She just insulted me." And in response to your thought, your heartbeat will rise and blood will flow into your head and you will go all red with anger. Or blood will pump through your body and you will boil in rage. So it is with every emotion. First the thought, then the body's response, which is the emotion. And it is instantaneous because the neurons in our body are firing at a very fast rate, in microseconds really. It's almost impossible to stop our body from reacting to our thoughts. So what's the way, you might ask? The good news is there is a way. Between the stimulus and the thought, there is a tiny gap. For example, after I have said something rude to you and before your mind has formulated a quick thought, which in most cases is a reaction, between the stimulus and the thought, there is a tiny gap. The trick is to find that gap and be in the gap and choose a response from that place of stillness. That's what the gap is, a small slice of stillness, where the mind has not entered yet. The practice of Vipassana helps to achieve that. Still the mind and be the gap so that your responses are coming from that space of stillness. You're responding to life rather than reacting to it in a knee-jerk fashion. This stillness might appear to you as boring. No drama, no action, not even entertainment, and certainly no Kim Kardashian. It might appear sterile, even dead. On the contrary, it is more alive than any mind-created space. Stillness connects you to your higher, deeper self, which is the source of creativity, aliveness, joy, compassion, connection, love, all the things we are seeking really. Stillness brings us to the state of awareness. Awareness of your breath, thoughts, body sensations, awareness of your state of being. Very different from thought-based observation. When we observe with our mind, we tend to judge, classify, compare, accept or reject. The mind is always looking back at our past experiences for reference and is judging our present experience based on the past. Awareness takes us into what is called the witness mode, where we are fully present and witnessing non-judgmentally. We are witnessing things as they are, not comparing them with some past experience or our expectation of how they should be. We will become aware of the isness of things. There's a very nice story that illustrates this. There was this farmer who had a horse, and this horse was his sole means of livelihood. One day the horse runs away and he loses his means of livelihood. So his neighbors come to him and say, "Oh ho ho ho, you've lost your main source of income. That's such a misfortune." And the farmer says, "It's neither good nor bad, it just is." A few days later, the horse comes back with another wild horse that is it has found on its wanderings. So now the farmer has two horses. The neighbors come and say, "Ah ha ha ha, now you have two horses, you've doubled your source of income. This is such a good fortune." And the farmer says, "It's neither good nor bad, it just is." Then one day his son, a young lad, is trying to break the horse because it's wild. He falls off the horse and breaks his leg. And then he's in bed with a cast and is disabled. So the neighbors come back and say, "Oh, ho, 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 this is such a misfortune." And the farmer says, "It's neither good nor bad, it just is." A few days later, the king's people come to the village because they are recruiting young men into the army because there's going to be a war. And they can't take him because he's in bed, disabled. And so they take the other young men in the village and take them into the army. So the neighbors come back and say, "Ah ha ha, this is such a good fortune. He escaped going to the war." And the farmer says, "It's neither good nor bad, it just is." So, how does Vipassana relate to the three marks of existence? Impermanence, suffering, and egolessness. When you're observing your thoughts, you will find that they are rather transitory. They flit about like clouds. One thought forms, it dissolves, then another thought forms and warps into another. And then when you become aware of them, they disappear. And since our world is in our mind, yes, our world is really in our mind, it's not out there. Since our world is in our mind, we realize our world is transitory, impermanent. Our worldview changes as our thoughts change. Quantum physicists are now saying that the universe appears and disappears based on our perception of it. There is something called Planck time, in which, in this many Planck time units, the world appears and disappears. So everything is passing. When we realize that, the world takes on a dream-like quality. The heaviness of the world lessens. We become lighter, more childlike. The world loses its grip on us. When we turn the focus beam of awareness onto pain, especially emotional pain, we find that the stories we've been telling ourselves are merely that, stories. I was neglected. I was abused. My father left us. My mother didn't love me. My partner took me for granted. So many stories. Sometimes these stories are so compelling that we become attached to them. They give us a solid identity, mostly that of a victim. We become the star of our own soap opera. And we don't want the drama to end because our victim identity would cease to be, and we think that would be the end of us. The light of awareness shows us what they really are. Merely stories. Pain dissolves and dissipates. We relinquish the need to hold on to the drama and the pain. It's said that pain is mandatory, but suffering is optional. Suffering occurs when we offer resistance to pain. We rail against it. We call it unfair. Why is this happening to me? But resisting pain only increases and prolongs the suffering. Through awareness, if we allow the pain to pass through us, it goes away. Awareness or witness mode is beyond the mind. It is a state we reach when we have stilled our mind. And our mind is where our identities are birthed and preserved. When we are born, we don't have an identity. We come as a clean slate. Then people start calling us names. Then you start to identify yourself with so-and-so's daughter or son. Then gender, race, religion, level of education, wealth. You become an adult and you identify yourself with a profession. When people would ask me, what do you do? I would say, I breathe and eat and sleep mostly. And they would get impatient and say, we all do that. What do you do for a living? All that breathing, eating and sleeping is what's keeping me alive, isn't it? I don't do that anymore because people found it very annoying and took offense. But I found it very constricting to be identified by a profession. But the reality is that we identify ourselves by the roles we play, by all the labels we have attached to ourselves. Mother, daughter, sister, father, employee. By this false self we have built over the years, this ego we so lovingly nurture. But if you look carefully, it's all in our mind really. When we move past the mind into awareness, the illusion of the false self, the illusion of separateness is shattered. It brings us closer to the realization of us being pure consciousness. That's the aim of the practice of Vipassana, the realization of consciousness that is beyond life and death, beyond pain and suffering, is eternal and is always in a state of bliss.